Thank you for joining me for Scary Stories for a Rainy Night. If you want to support the channel, please tap the like button for me, subscribe, and introduce yourself in the comments below. I really hope you enjoy. Now let's begin. This narrative unfolds 2 years ago, when I shared a home with my 2 younger sisters and my father. We resided in a neighborhood that wasn't exactly dangerous, but it wasn't the most ideal place to live either. I remember some neighbors being arrested for drug dealing when I was around 5. However, this tale isn't about them. During the summer of 2018, my sisters and I often stayed up late into the night, sometimes only heading to bed after dawn. I was 17 while my sisters were 15 and 13. My father, being the responsible adult, would retire for the night early. To provide clarity, let me describe the layout of our home. It was a single-story house with 4 doors at the front. 3 led into our living room and 1 into my bedroom. Our backyard fence had recently been destroyed by a storm, and there were 2 doors at the back of the house, one leading to the kitchen and another to my father's room. One night, around 12:30 a.m., I was engaged in my usual activity, listening to spooky stories on my phone while creating art on my iPad. I avoided using earbuds due to my paranoia about missing something while using them. My sisters, who shared a room down the hallway, were engaged in their own nighttime activities, which didn't concern me. My father was sound asleep in his room. Now, I don't know how it is for everyone else, but I tend to become incredibly tense when listening to scary stories, making me hyper-aware of my surroundings. So you can imagine my shock when I suddenly heard a loud banging on our front door. For intense knocks resonated throughout the house, and I could feel the front door rattle with each strike. I held my breath, praying I had misheard. The last thing I wanted was for someone to be at our front door. At that moment, my middle sister Jen rushed into my room, trying to be quiet. Her eyes were wide with fear. "You've heard that too, right?" she asked, her voice shaking. I nodded, my heart racing in my chest. "We need to wake Dad," I replied, moving toward my father's bedroom. She followed closely behind. As we made our way to our dad's room, my youngest sister, Ness, peeked out from her room, looking frightened as well. I opened my dad's door and gently shook him awake, trembling slightly. One of my greatest fears is the thought of someone breaking into our home. "Dad, there's someone at the front door." Even as I spoke, I felt a wave of nausea. "What?" my dad mumbled, clearly displeased to be disturbed. "There's someone here," Jen whispered. I heard it. "Someone knocked on the door," I added. My father slowly got out of bed, knowing that my sisters and I often jumped to the worst conclusions in such situations. So he assumed we were doing the same this time. I watched silently as he approached the front door, my stomach twisting. "There's no one out there," he said, looking through the blinds unimpressed. My heart sank a bit. I started to doubt myself, but since my sisters had also heard the knocking, I knew I wasn't imagining things. We attempted to convince him before he returned to bed, but he remained unconvinced, too exhausted to care about our concerns. Feeling defeated yet frightened, I took my mattress off my bed and slept in my sister's room that night, placing a baseball bat beside me. My vivid imagination had me convinced that whoever was at the door intended to harm us. I felt the need to protect my younger sisters from any threat that might intrude upon our home. The next day unfolded uneventfully. My sisters and I were aware that we had heard something, but our dad dismissed our attempts to explain, thinking we were merely tired or that a large bug had hit the door, which was absurd. It wasn't until around 11 p.m. that evening, while my father was relaxing on one of the couches in the living room, that we heard the pounding again. This time it was much more forceful and directly on the door behind my father. My dad shouted, "What the?" and rushed toward the front door. I had been standing in the living room when the banging occurred again, and my sisters hurried to stand with me after hearing our dad yell. We were all shaken. Our father rarely raised his voice like that. Tears filled my eyes as he prepared to confront whoever was outside. I pleaded with him not to go out, fearing for his safety. He instructed my sisters and me to call the police and cursed when he realized the person who had knocked was no longer there. My sisters dialed 911, and the officers arrived promptly, discussing the situation with my father. They mentioned that there had been similar reports in the area and assured us they would do their best to find the culprit. The police searched around our house but found no one, even checking the backyard where I feared the intruder might be hiding. They reassured us that someone would patrol the neighborhood that night. After the officers left, my dad apologized for not believing us the previous night. We accepted his apology and moved on, secured all the doors, and stayed awake longer than my sisters and me. Unable to calm my nerves, I opted to sleep in my sister's room again that night. Eventually, I tried to put the incident behind me. Months went by, but not without nightmares and sleep paralysis stemming from that night. Most of my nightmares involved someone breaking in and harming my sisters, while others ended in even more horrific scenarios. I had almost forgotten about the whole ordeal until one day I returned home from school and Ness ran up to me, buzzing with excitement. She informed me that the police had discovered the identity of the person knocking on doors about a month earlier. It was an older man residing a few houses down from us. They had managed to stop him, but I'm not sure if he received a warning or something else. He had some mental instability, and no one opened their doors for him. Ness revealed that the same man had been arrested earlier that day. I was stunned. I had only been knocking on doors at odd hours of the night. I'm relieved to say he is in jail now and no longer resides in that neighborhood. I haven't looked into his crimes further, aside from confirming his arrest the day it happened. I'm also happy to report that after another recent incident involving someone attempting to break into our home, my father installed a Ring doorbell one equipped with a camera, which has provided my sisters and me some reassurance. I sincerely hope this man receives the justice he deserves, or perhaps the help he needs if he truly is unwell. I no longer fly. I used to quite a bit, actually. It was a significant part of my job to travel across the country, pitching investment opportunities to wealthy hedge fund managers. It was a comfortable job, paying far more than it was worth. However, now I work from home and drive everywhere, talking everywhere. I reside in New York City, but my parents live in Florida since they retired. Yes, I drive down to see them 3 times a year sometimes. It's pretty inconvenient, but I'd rather make that long drive and risk getting stomach flu from bad roadside tacos than fly. And now I'll explain why. It was a routine flight from LaGuardia to Houston, another business trip to network with affluent investors in Texas. I was seated by the window in business class. The takeoff was standard. Everything was going smoothly. Nothing I hadn't experienced countless times before. After getting up at around 5:30 to catch the flight, definitely not a morning person, I quickly shut the window flap, closed my eyes, and attempted to catch some sleep to be fresh for the afternoon meeting. Just as I was about to doze off, a loud pop resonated through the cabin. In my drowsy state, I initially thought it was someone opening a champagne bottle for a celebratory breakfast. I glanced around, but no one had a bottle, and there was no attendant with an ice bucket. Nothing of the sort. Then a horrifying thought crossed my mind. To quell my seemingly irrational fears, I slid open the window shade to check on the plane's left-wing engine. I expected everything to be fine. Nothing had ever gone wrong on a flight before. Though I had experienced fleeting moments of anxiety in the past, this time was different. The popping sound had been exactly what I feared. Smoke was pouring from the engine, a thick stream of dark vapor trailing behind us. I grabbed a flight attendant and silently pointed out the window, trying not to incite panic. When she looked, her face turned pale, and she hurried up the aisle toward the cockpit. Moments later, more passengers began to notice the danger, and cries of alarm echoed throughout the plane as more and more people became aware of the peril we were in. Passengers rushed to the left side of the aircraft, peering out the windows and screaming. The flight attendants did everything they could to maintain calm among the passengers. Just before the chaos reached a breaking point, the pilot spoke over the intercom. That was one of the most surreal moments of my life. People were panicking, yet the captain remained calm to the point of appearing indifferent. I suppose that's the level of training they undergo. The captain instructed everyone to remain calm, return to their seats, and assured us that the plane would make an emergency landing at the nearest airport, which happened to be in Virginia. We actually landed without issue, and the only remotely negative consequence was that I had to reschedule the investment meeting. However, I swear part of me thought the plane was about to become a fireball as the engine exploded, sending us plummeting toward the ground at 500 miles per hour. It was undoubtedly the most terrifying experience I've ever faced. Despite my efforts, I could never bring myself to board a plane again. So, as I mentioned, I drive everywhere now. And while it can be a hassle, it's far preferable to the cold sweats. And panic attacks I'd experience while waiting on a runway, anticipating the engines might ignite in flames. My mother's side of the family is quite large. She has 3 brothers and 3 sisters, all of whom are married and have multiple children. It goes without saying that when summer arrives and it's time for our annual family vacation, there are endless hours of fun and entertainment to be had. My grandparents are relatively affluent, In each year, they would use a portion of their fortune to rent a lake house, cabin, or a beach mansion for the entire family to enjoy. For the year in question, they chose to rent a sizable 4-story lakeside home. Came complete with a dock, game room, movie theater, expansive kitchen, and even a tube slide system that connected the floors. What was intended to be a delightful getaway would soon transform into one of my most distressing memories to date. Before we dive deeper into the story, I'd like to quickly explain the layout of the house, as it's crucial for understanding the rest of the tale. The house was built on a steep slope leading down to a lake. The structure was literally constructed horizontally off the side of the hill. On the side of the home that didn't connect to the hill, there were long stilts supporting it, connecting the base of the house to the bottom of the slope. For additional support, bricks were placed between the stilts, creating a vast cavern-like space beneath the house, accessible only through a cellar door on the bottom floor. This pit had no insulation and dirt floors, which was essentially just the bottom of the hill filled with spiders and other small creatures. The homeowners warned us against venturing down there, as it would be a 10-foot drop to the ground with no ladder for climbing back up. Anyone who found themselves in that space would essentially be trapped in a tall, dark cement pit. Now back to the story. After settling in and enjoying the first few nights with my family, the more mature members, including myself, my brother, and all my aunts' uncles, and their significant others, decided to play a game known as sardines. This game is essentially an inverse hide-and-seek. One person hides while the rest seek. All the lights in the house are turned off, creating complete darkness. The hider has a minute to conceal themselves, and once they are hidden, the seekers begin their search. If a seeker finds the hider, they quietly join them until everyone is hidden, leaving only one seeker remaining. Now that you have a quick synopsis of the game and the large number of participants, you can see how this could lead to a wonderfully entertaining evening. My Uncle Mike was chosen to hide first. We turned off all the lights in the house, and after the minute of hiding time elapsed, the search began. My brother, aunts, uncles, and I scoured the first couple of floors with no success. We checked under tables and closets and behind couches. After about 15 minutes of searching without any luck, an idea popped into my head. Although I initially dismissed it, I couldn't shake thoughts of that cellar door and the space beneath the house. Being one of the younger family members at around 17 years old, I wanted to impress everyone by being the first to find him. So, I quietly slipped away from the group and descended the last 2 stories to reach the bottom floor, where the cellar doors were located. When I arrived, I felt my body trembling with adrenaline. After opening the door to the small closet that contained the cellar doors, I was quaking with fear. They appeared so foreboding. In the dim light, I approached them and placed a hand on each handle. Before opening the door, I could hear scuffling and maniacal laughter coming from below. This only confirmed my suspicion that I had found him, and my fear transformed into excitement at the thought of his presence. I flung the doors open and peered down into the dark abyss of the hole. I quietly called down to my uncle, informing him that I had discovered him and that I was going to drop down to join him. He continued to laugh, which unnerved me further, since it was unlike him to do that without at least acknowledging he had been found or instructing me to join him. Eager to be the first seeker to locate him, I slowly began to lower myself into the hole, gripping the ledge of the cellar door and letting my feet dangle. I could hear his laughter growing louder and sensed him approaching. A dreadful odor hit me the moment I descended further into the hole. I still clung to the cellar door, hesitating to drop the last 5 feet. Being closer to the ground, I could begin to make out his shape, but it looked off. I couldn't discern any facial features, but his slouched posture and lanky arms made me hesitate for a moment longer. Just then, I heard my aunt calling for me, saying they had found my uncle and that I was the last one searching. My mind didn't immediately connect the dots, but when it did, saying my heart sank to my stomach would be an understatement. The overwhelming fear I felt in that moment is something I've yet to experience again. Without a second thought, I pulled myself back up out of the hole and ran to my aunt, pleading for help and screaming about the man beneath the house. She looked confused initially, but sprang into action when she too heard the laughter coming from the hole. She called for my uncles while she dialed the police, providing them with a quick description of the man. However, since we were in a remote area, it took them about 25 minutes to arrive. When they finally did, it was a flurry of red and blue lights. What unsettled me most was that a full SWAT team showed up as well. A dozen officers stormed into the home, which felt excessive for what seemed to be a mentally unstable intruder. Moments later, they emerged, escorting a deranged-looking man in handcuffs. It wasn't until later that I learned the full details. The man they arrested was indeed mentally ill and had a warrant out for his arrest for the mutilation of his ex-wife. I later discovered that the foul smell emanating from the room was his feces. It appeared he had been trapped down there for several days, claiming he had gotten stuck while trying to hide from law enforcement. It has been about 3 years since that incident, and the memory has faded somewhat with time. However, there are still nights when I lie awake, grateful that I didn't let go of that cellar door ledge. I've heard countless accounts of others' experiences with sleep paralysis, and I thought I would share my scariest ones. Many people are familiar with the concept of shadow people. I've encountered an unknown dark force pinning me down in bed, suffocating me. However, the other 2 instances I've experienced are even more bizarre and linger in my mind often. About 4 years ago, I was 24 years old. I still lived with my mother since I was in my 2nd year of nursing school, and it was simply more convenient to stay at home. One night, everything seemed fine until I woke up suddenly for no apparent reason. I was unable to move or speak. I heard what sounded like static mumbling on my left side. Terrified, I listened intently while desperately trying to move. Gradually, the static grew clearer, and I heard young voices, children's voices. They began chanting, "You're going to die," followed by giggles after each chant. It was reminiscent of a twisted nursery rhyme. They repeated the same phrase over and over. My heart raced in my chest. Logically, I was telling myself this wasn't real. For those who may not be religious, this might not make sense, but I began to pray in my head to make it stop. It felt as though I was screaming internally, unable to vocalize. It seemed to last an eternity before it finally subsided, allowing me to move again. I rushed out of my room to find my mom and recounted everything that had happened. I didn't return to my room that night. She looked at me skeptically. I'm not sure if she genuinely believed me or understood sleep paralysis, but it's an experience I'll never forget. My second story occurred around the same time. When sleep paralysis became a frequent occurrence, I started sleeping with the lights on. For added comfort, my cats would curl up on my bed with me until I fell asleep. For a while I experienced no episodes of sleep paralysis, so I assumed this was the solution I needed. As usual, I went to bed with the lights on and one of my cats, Salem, nestled in my arm while I slept. I woke up feeling that familiar dread. I couldn't believe it was happening again. I felt as if I was being watched. To my horror, I saw a white figure standing very close to me on the right side of my bed. My heart felt like it dropped into my stomach. I noticed its piercing, bright blue eyes staring at me. I glanced down at my cat, who appeared oblivious to the figure and was sound asleep. This reassured me a bit, reminding me that this wasn't real. After a few moments, the figure vanished. Even with the lights on, I didn't feel safe. Thankfully, I don't experience sleep paralysis as often as I used to, but those 2 instances are etched in my memory. For anyone who suffers from sleep paralysis, you know exactly what I went through and how genuinely horrifying it is. This story takes place back when I was still in high school. To earn money to support my video game habit, I regularly tutored an 11-year-old girl. We got along so well that her parents eventually asked me to babysit her and her younger brother a few times. One particular night, the parents planned to head downtown to catch a baseball game, followed by drinks with friends, assuring me they would return before midnight. Basic babysitting job, right? Wrong. Around 8 p.m., it started pouring rain. We lived in a Gulf city, where storms can blow in quickly and lead to flooding in no time. When it became clear we were in for a serious storm, the parents attempted to return home as quickly and safely as possible, but they ended up trapped in a parking lot due to rising water. The irony was lost on me at that moment, but I see it clearly now. The kids' parents called to inform me of the situation, and we agreed I would spend the night in their guest bedroom while they booked a motel. I got the kids into bed and settled down in the kitchen to do homework and watch Netflix. After a little while, I noticed water seeping in from under the back doors. They had a large house with 3 double doors leading to the back, so it was quite spacious. I gathered every towel in the house to wipe up the water and use them to block the door. Once I had cleaned up most of the mess, I returned to the kitchen table to continue watching Netflix. Not much else I could do, right? but it couldn't have been more than 15 minutes later when the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. This startled me, but I tried to remain calm. That's when the burglar alarm started blaring in the other room. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I was in a pitch-black house with 2 young kids, surrounded by flooded streets with no way for anyone to drive home. After a moment of sheer panic, I realized with horror that I was the closest thing to an adult in the house. No one was looking after me. In fact, I was responsible for those kids. So, I grabbed the biggest, sharpest kitchen knife I could find and went to check all the doors. They were all still shut, and no one was in the house. I called the parents, who explained that the alarm had gone off when the power cut out. I just needed to disable it with a code upstairs. This happened about 3 more times over the following hours. Once the power was restored, I thought things had settled down, but then we received a tornado warning. I went upstairs to get the kids, and we all huddled together in a study for about an hour until the danger passed. By this point, it was 2 a.m., and I fell asleep in the guest bedroom. The parents woke me around 7 o'clock a.m. when they returned, and I drove home past fallen branches and abandoned cars. It was surreal, but thankfully, everyone was safe in the end. Just a few days ago, I had the strangest experience I've encountered in over 10 years of driving a cab. I picked up a well-dressed, attractive, middle-aged man. However, when he began to speak, he said the most bizarre things. What started as an amusing conversation quickly spiraled into an all-consuming fear. Let me explain. On Saturday night, I was working the late shift. Most of my fares come from bars. I had just dropped off a pair of inebriated women when I noticed a tall, well-dressed man waving me down around 3 o'clock a.m. The neighborhood, combined with his fancy suit, suggested he might be a generous tipper. After he climbed in and closed the door, he took off his hat, a fine-looking straw fedora. His attire and movie star looks seemed out of place. I initially feared I had picked up a time traveler. After the usual pleasantries, I asked him where he was headed. I don't really know. I'm in town on business and was hoping someone could show me around, he replied. His answer made me chuckle. It seemed awfully late for a sightseeing tour. As long as you're paying, mister, I'll drive you anywhere, I said, and that's how it all began. For about the next 2 hours, I showed him around town, pointing out the university, the Capitol building, and other typical tourist spots. At some point during our tour, I remembered to inquire about the nature of his business. So, what kind of work do you do? His response made me laugh even more than his earlier comments. The guy was a natural comedian. I'm what some would refer to as a contract killer. Given that we had been having such a good time, I decided to play along. Okay, mister, I'll humor you. How does one go about hiring a contract killer? Well, a woman contacts me. I won't disclose how they do so. If their references check out, we proceed with business. She provides me with the names and any other details I require. If I decide to accept the job, we move on to the payment. If we agree on a price, then I get to work. With all that anonymity, I asked him how he ensured payment after completing a job. It seemed my choice of words amused him. Probably wouldn't be wise to share that part. We professionals have to keep some secrets. Okay, fair enough. But how does a client know you've completed the job? I regretted asking the question even before I finished, but he still entertained me with an answer, albeit with a hint of sarcasm in his tone. We live in an age of 24-hour news cycles and numerous social media platforms. Don't you think if your dad suddenly passed away, someone wouldn't contact your mother first? If you don't find out on your own, someone will inform you? Once I'm compensated, my relationship with the client concludes. She's ultimately on her own after that. His last response prompted another question from me. What happens if something goes wrong? Say if she gets arrested or implicates herself. He paused for a moment, perhaps weighing how much to disclose to a stranger in his cab. There are contingencies in place to protect myself. First off, if I've done my job correctly, the client shouldn't have any information about me to share with the authorities. And if, by some chance, I screw up badly enough that she can, I have multiple exit strategies. I certainly won't let the police capture me. None of us get to live forever. There were moments I had to remind myself this was all a game. He made it entertaining nonetheless. His imagination and foresight impressed me. We had been playing this game for hours when I finally thought to ask how he got into this line of work. I joined the Army right after high school, seemed my talents caught the attention of my superiors. They referred me to a couple of government officials, and I worked for them for 10 years before deciding to go into business for myself. I have to say, mister, you're really good at this. You should consider storytelling if that's not your actual profession. I'm genuinely impressed. I know it wasn't just blowing smoke. The rain drummed against the windows, a relentless rhythm that set the mood for the evening. Inside the modest home, the warm glow of the living room lamp flickered, casting elongated shadows that danced across the walls. Sarah sat curled up on the couch, a well-worn novel resting in her lap, but her mind was elsewhere. The day had been long, and the shadows of fatigue loomed over her, yet something about the night felt different charged, with an unsettling energy that she couldn't quite place. The clock ticked steadily, the sound both comforting and ominous. She had always found solace in the quiet routine of her evenings, but tonight, that tranquility was punctured by the sudden, sharp sound of a knock at the door. It echoed through the house, reverberating in her chest, causing her to sit up straight, the book slipping from her fingers and landing softly on the carpet. Who could that be? She muttered to herself, glancing at the clock.
Oh.
It was late, too late for casual visitors. The rain continued to pour, the wind howling outside as if warning her to remain still. She felt a creeping unease crawl up her spine, the kind that whispered of danger lurking just beyond her threshold. Tentatively, she rose from the couch, her heart racing. The knock came again, more insistent this time, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She approached the door slowly, each step heavy with trepidation. Peering through the peephole, she saw nothing but darkness, a void that seemed to swallow the light around it. The street lamp outside flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced in the corners of her vision. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. There was no response, only the sound of the rain mingling with her rising heartbeat. She hesitated, uncertainty gnawing at her. Should she open the door? The world outside seemed to hold its breath, and she felt the weight of the night pressing in on her. Another knock, this time louder, more forceful. Panic surged through her. Maybe it was someone in trouble, she thought, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. But deep down, a voice whispered that it could just as easily be a ruse, a ploy to lure her into vulnerability. "Please, I need help," a voice suddenly called from the other side, a man's voice, strained and desperate. My car broke down, and I saw the words hung in the air, heavy with urgency. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to retreat, to lock the door and call the police. But she couldn't ignore the fear in his voice, the genuine plea that resonated with her own humanity. "Stay there. I'll call someone," she shouted back, her hands trembling as she fumbled for her phone on the table. The man's voice broke through her thoughts again, more frantic this time. "Please, just let me in. I swear I won't hurt you. I just need to get out of the rain." Her heart raced as she weighed her options. The rain continued to pour, and the wind howled like a beast, but the man's voice tugged at her empathy. What if he was telling the truth? What if he was just a stranger caught in a storm, desperate for shelter? Taking a deep breath, she moved back to the door, her mind racing. She could see the outline of a figure through the frosted glass, dark and indistinct. With shaking hands, she turned the deadbolt and cracked the door open just enough to see him clearly. He stood there, drenched and shivering, his hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes were wide with fear, and his clothes were soaked through. "Please," he gasped, "I really need your help." Before she could respond, a sudden gust of wind slammed the door against her arm, forcing it open wider. The man stumbled forward, nearly falling into her living room. Instinct kicked in, and she stepped back, her body tense as she processed the situation. He was inside now, and the door swung shut behind him with a resounding thud. "Thank you," he breathed, his voice a mix of relief and exhaustion. "I thought I was going to drown out there. Who are you?" Zara demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "What happened?" "My name is Mark," he said, running a hand through his wet hair. "My car broke down a few miles back, and I thought I could make it here to get help. I didn't mean to intrude." Intrude. The word echoed in her mind like a warning bell. She studied him closely, searching for any signs of deceit. His eyes held a flicker of sincerity, but the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, warping her perception. "Why didn't you call for help?" she pressed, trying to keep her voice steady. "There are services. I didn't have my phone. I'd left it in the car." he interrupted, his eyes darting around the room. I just saw your house and I thought maybe you could help. The tension thickened in the air and she felt the walls closing in. You shouldn't have just barged in like that, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. I need to call the police. Please, he said, desperation creeping into his tone. I'm not a threat. I just need to get warm and figure out what to do next. I can't go back out there. She hesitated, her mind racing with possibilities. The rain outside was relentless, a storm that mirrored the chaos in her heart. Okay, she finally said, her voice trembling. But you need to stay here and not make any sudden moves. I don't want any trouble. Mark nodded, relief washing over his features. I understand, thank you. I promise I won't cause any trouble. She backed away slowly. Sarah felt the weight of his gaze on her, a mix of gratitude and something else, something darker. She turned to the kitchen, her mind racing. She needed to call the police, but the phone felt heavy in her hand. What if he was telling the truth? What if this was just a misunderstanding? The rain continued to pour, a steady backdrop to her spiraling thoughts. She could hear Mark moving behind her, the sound of him shaking off the water like a dog. She glanced back over her shoulder, catching sight of him as he rubbed his arms, trying to warm himself. Do you have a towel? He asked, his voice softer now. Yeah, just a second, she replied, moving toward the bathroom. She grabbed a towel, her heart still racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As she returned to the living room, she held the towel out to him, her hand shaking slightly. Here, she said, trying to maintain composure, to dry off. Thank you, he said, taking the towel and rubbing it over his hair. I really appreciate this. You have no idea how scary it was out there. Silence enveloped them, the sound of rain filling the spaces between their words. Sarah couldn't help but feel the tension in the air, a palpable energy that wrapped around them like a thick fog. She could sense his eyes on her, studying her, and it made her skin crawl. Do you live around here? He asked, breaking the silence. Just down the street, she replied, her voice cautious. What about you? I was just passing through on my way to a job interview, he said, his tone casual, but there was an edge to it. I didn't expect the storm to hit so suddenly. Right, she said, forcing herself to relax. Well, I hope you get it sorted out. Me too, he said, his gaze lingering on her. You're really kind for helping me. The compliment hung in the air, but it felt like a double-edged sword. She wanted to believe him, but the unease continued to gnaw at her. The rain outside intensified, the sound becoming a roaring symphony that drowned out her thoughts. Maybe I should call the police, she said, almost to herself. Just to let them know you're here. Please don't, he said quickly, his voice rising slightly. I swear I'm not a threat. I just need a little time to figure things out. His reaction sent a chill down her spine. Why are you so afraid of the police? She asked, her heart racing. What are you hiding? Nothing. I don't want to get in trouble for something that wasn't my fault, he replied, desperation creeping into his voice. I swear I'm not dangerous. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension. Sarah took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to be cautious. What do you mean by that? She pressed, her voice trembling slightly. I panicked. I didn't mean to intrude. I just thought I could find help, he said, his voice pleading. She felt her heart race, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. You should leave, she said, her voice shaking. You need to go. Can't, he replied, his voice low and intimidating. Not out there, not in this storm. The realization hit her like a cold wave. He wasn't just a lost traveler, was trapped, and she was now part of his desperate situation. The shadows in her home seemed to close in around her, and she felt the walls pressing tighter, the darkness creeping closer. Stay back, she warned, holding the towel like a shield between them. I don't want any trouble. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of something dark crossing his features. I'm not here to hurt you. I just need a place to stay until the storm passes. The tension hung heavy in the air, and Sarah felt her breath quicken. She needed to think to find a way out of this situation. I'm calling the police, she said, her voice firm. Don't, he shouted, taking a step forward, his eyes wild. I don't understand. If you call them, they'll think I'm a criminal. Why should I trust you? She shot back, her heart racing. You barged into my home without permission. I'm sorry, he pleaded, desperation lacing his words. I didn't mean to. I'm scared, just like you. The storm outside raged on, the wind howling like a beast. Sarah felt the walls closing in, the shadows growing darker. Ow! She needed to escape, to find a way out of this nightmare. But where could she go? The house felt like a trap, and Mark was the predator within it.
Please,
He said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Just give me a chance. I promise I won't hurt you. For a moment, she saw the fear in his eyes, a reflection of her own. It was a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability that made her hesitate. But in the depths of her mind, a voice warned her to remain cautious. This was a dangerous game, and the stakes were too high. Get out, she said, her voice trembling with fear.
Ow! You need to leave now, Sarah, please.
He implored, desperation cracking his voice. You don't know what it's like out there. Just let me stay until morning. I won't cause any trouble. The storm raged on outside, and she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. She needed to act, to find a way to protect herself. I'll call the police, she said, her voice steady. I won't hesitate, don't, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. You don't understand the consequences? The tension escalated, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. Sarah felt the walls closing in, the shadows warping into something sinister. She needed to escape, to find a way out of this nightmare. The storm outside roared, the wind howling like a beast. Sarah's heart raced as she backed away, her instincts screaming at her to run. But there was nowhere to go, no escape from the darkness that enveloped her. Please, just let me stay, Mark pleaded, his eyes wide with desperation. I won't hurt you, I promise. The fear in his voice resonated with her own, and for a moment she hesitated. But the shadows in the room felt heavier, pressing down on her like a weight. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was in danger, that his desperation masked something darker. Get out, she repeated, her voice trembling with fear. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of anger crossing his features. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice low and threatening. I just wanted help. Before she could respond, he lunged forward and instinct took over. Sarah turned and ran, her heart racing as she dashed toward the back door. She needed to escape, to find a way out of this nightmare. The storm raged outside, the wind howling like a beast as she fumbled with the door. The rain poured down, soaking her to the bone, but she didn't care. She needed to get away from him, away from the darkness that threatened to consume her. Sarah, wait, Mark shouted, his voice echoing in the storm. Please don't leave me. She didn't look back. She burst through the door, the cold air hitting her like a slap. She ran into the night, the rain drenching her as she stumbled down the driveway, her heart pounding in her chest. The world outside was a chaotic blur, the storm raging around her. She could hear Mark's footsteps behind her, but she didn't stop. She needed to get to safety, to find help. The darkness enveloped her as she ran, the shadows closing in. She could hear the sound of the rain pounding against the pavement, the wind howling like a beast. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stop. Sarah, please, Mark's voice echoed in the distance, desperate and pleading. I'm not a threat. I just need help. But she couldn't trust him, not now. She had to keep running, to find a way out of this nightmare. As she stumbled through the rain-soaked streets, her mind raced with fear and confusion. She felt the weight of the world pressing down on her, the shadows closing in. She needed to escape, to find a way to protect herself. But where could she go? The storm raged on, the wind howling like a beast. She felt lost in the darkness, trapped in a nightmare that threatened to consume her. Suddenly, she spotted the flicker of lights in the distance, a house, warm and inviting against the backdrop of the storm. Hope surged within her as she sprinted toward it, her heart racing. As she approached the front door, she pounded on it with all her strength, desperation lacing her voice. Help, please. Someone help me. The door swung open, revealing a startled couple. What's going on? The woman asked, her eyes wide with concern. Please, I need help. There's someone after me. Sarah gasped, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The couple exchanged worried glances, and the man stepped forward. Come inside, he urged, pulling her into the warmth of their home. You're safe here. As they closed the door behind her, Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was safe, at least for now. But the shadows of the night still loomed, a reminder of the terror she had just escaped. Who's after you? The woman asked, concern etched on her face. She hesitated, her heart still racing. I don't know, I just was home alone and someone knocked at my door. I let him in, but then things got out of control. The couple exchanged worried glances, and the man placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You're safe now. We'll call the police and make sure you're protected. As they moved to the phone, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, but the shadows of the night still lingered in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was far from over, that the darkness would continue to chase her.
Ow.
But for now, she was safe, and that was enough. As the couple spoke to the police, Sarah took a moment to breathe, to gather her thoughts. She was grateful for their kindness, but the fear still gnawed at her. What if Mark found her again? What if the storm brought more than just rain? The couple returned, their expressions serious. The police are on their way, the man said, his voice steady. You're going to be okay. Thank you, Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I would have done without you. As they waited, the storm raged on outside, a relentless force that mirrored the chaos within her. She felt the weight of the night pressing down on her, the shadows creeping closer. But she was safe now, at least for the moment, and that was enough. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, a beacon of hope cutting through the storm. As the police arrived, Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. She was no longer alone in her fear. Help had come. But in the back of her mind, a whisper lingered, a reminder that the darkness was still out there, waiting, watching. And though she had found refuge, the echoes of fear would linger long after the storm had passed.